Not every story that changes your life happens right in front of you. Some of them happen through a screen. It was just another night on virtual call duty. A long shift, 10 back-to-back teleconsultations. Most were simple cases: sore throats, allergies, anxiety flare-ups. I was exhausted, coffee cup in hand, ready to finish the night. It was almost 10 p.m., and all I wanted was to log off and finally rest. Then, the last name on the list appeared. Laura Jenkins, 67 years old. For a second, I almost rescheduled her for the next morning. But something still don't know what made me click accept. The screen lit up, and the cold blue glow pulled me back to reality. Another call, another story, another face on the other side of the world, and then I saw her. Silver gray hair neatly pulled back, glasses resting gently on the tip of her nose, a cup of steaming tea cradled in her hands, as if that warmth was the only thing still keeping her together. She had that kind of gentle, unforgettable look, a blend of kindness and quiet sorrow. She seemed calm, but her eyes told a different story. There was a heaviness there. Not the kind that comes from exhaustion of the body, but the kind that comes from carrying too many nights alone. "Doctor," she said softly, her tone polite, almost apologetic, "forgive me for calling so late. I just didn't want to go to bed without making sure it's nothing serious." There was a faint smile on her lips, but behind it, a subtle apology, as if existing at that hour of the night was somehow an inconvenience to the world. I smiled, trying to sound more human than clinical. "Don't worry, Mrs. Jenkins. You did the right thing. Tell me what you're feeling." She lowered her gaze for a moment, like someone preparing to confess something private. "It's just a little pressure here." She touched her chest with trembling fingers, probably anxiety. Her voice quivered slightly. Not from pain, but from uncertainty. It was as if she was trying to convince me, or maybe herself, that she wasn't really scared or completely alone. While I reviewed her information on the screen, I asked her to describe her symptoms more precisely. No sweating. No radiating pain to the arm or jaw. Medically, nothing screamed emergency, but there was something else. Something invisible. That subtle mix of physical discomfort and unspoken sorrow. The kind that doesn't show up in vital signs, but in the way someone stares into the void, hoping to hear a voice that's no longer there. I asked gently, "Have you been through anything recently that might be causing stress?" Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The kind that weighs more than any word ever could. Her eyes began to glisten, and when she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "My husband passed away 2 months ago." It was barely a whisper, a fragile breath that seemed to cost her strength to release. After 50 years together, she continued, "It's hard to fall asleep alone. Sometimes it feels like my heart doesn't fit inside my chest anymore." There was such purity in the way she said it that I had to look away for a moment, just to collect myself. I didn't know what to say at first. There's no manual for that. No protocol. No training that prepares you for the moment someone shares their deepest pain through a web scam. So I just spoke honestly. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Mrs. Jenkins. Truly, I understand that emptiness. I've lost people too." She looked up, surprised, and for a second her eyes softened, as if gratitude momentarily replaced her grief. She smiled, not a happy smile, but one of those weary smiles that appear when the soul finds brief comfort in shared pain. We talked for a while longer. I asked her to check her blood pressure, to breathe slowly, to try to relax. Meanwhile, kept watching her readings on my screen. Heart rate, normal. Blood pressure, stable. Oxygen levels, fine. Everything looked okay, and yet, something inside me felt wrong. A gut feeling, as if her body was screaming something the numbers couldn't show. Her breathing changed, subtly at first. A shorter exhale, a longer pause. Then, suddenly, her expression tightened. The color drained from her face. Her skin turned pale, almost gray. Her lips trembled, struggling for air. She clutched her chest, as if trying to hold on to something slipping away inside her. Let out a small, terrified moan. "Mrs. Jenkins," I said, trying to keep my voice steady even as my pulse spiked. "Laura, Can you hear me?" She nodded weakly, gasping between shallow breaths. Just a second, I feel, and then the connection blurred. The image flickered. Her camera shook. I watched as the cup of tea slipped from her hand and shattered off screen. "Laura." I shouted into the mic. "Laura, look at me." No response. Only the faint, uneven sound of her breathing. That kind of silence that seems to swallow time itself. My chest tightened. I immediately opened the emergency panel and called for help. My hands were shaking, but my words came out fast, almost mechanical. Address, age, symptoms. Urgency. While I spoke, I couldn't look away from the screen. I didn't dare. It felt like if I looked away for even a second, she might vanish completely. "Laura, listen to me," I said, almost pleading. "I need you to breathe slowly. I'm right here with you. Help is on the way. Do you hear me?" Her eyes, half open, seemed to search for something. Air, comfort, presence. She tried to speak. Her voice was barely a murmur. I didn't want to go alone. Those words hit me like a blade. So simple, so human, so painfully honest. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice not to break. "You're not going alone, Laura. I'm here. Stay with me." And then I just kept talking. I don't even remember everything I said. I told her I could already hear the sirens in the distance. I asked her to think of something beautiful, a happy memory. Sound of her husband's voice telling her everything would be okay, with every word. Her breathing fought against the silence, and I fought, too, against helplessness. It felt like watching someone drown while you're trapped behind glass, unable to reach them. Only my voice. Only presence through pixels and sound. And then I heard the sirens. Time seemed to start moving again. The camera shook faintly. Red and blue lights flashed through her window. Footsteps. Voices. Urgency. And then the call froze. And ended. The distant sound of sirens lingered in my head. I kept talking to her, even though she was gone from the screen. I talked about how sometimes the body speaks the pain the soul can't express. How the physical heart and the emotional one are never truly separate. She looked at me one last time, her eyes glossy with tears, and whispered, "Thank you, doctor." Her breathing slowed, and then silence. Only my own voice remained. Repeating her name, hoping she'd answer. The screen froze. Her face still there, still peaceful, as if she'd simply fallen asleep. When the paramedics arrived, I heard them faintly through the connection. I gave them the details I'd seen. And then the call finally disconnected. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark for a long while. It's a strange feeling. To end a video call knowing that someone on the other side of that fragile screen might be dying. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I kept thinking about her, about how lonely people can feel, and how sometimes the most human thing we can do is simply be there, even if it's only through a screen. Several days passed. I went back to my usual routine, consultation after consultation, trying not to think too much about what had happened. But one afternoon, while I was on shift at the hospital emergency department, an ambulance arrived. I glanced at the incoming report. Female patient, 67 years old. Cardiac arrest, successfully resuscitated. Name Laura Jenkins. My blood ran cold. For a second, the world seemed to pause. Then I ran. When I reached the emergency bay, there she was, cuted, unconscious, but alive. I stood by her bedside for a moment, barely breathing. Her hand was cold, but firm when I held it. I leaned closer and whispered, "I told you, Laura, you wouldn't be alone." 2 weeks passed since that night. 2 weeks that felt longer than most months. Sometimes, in the middle of another video consultation, her face would flash through my mind. That fragile voice echoing between the walls of my memory. I didn't want to go alone. That afternoon, the hospital was unusually calm. One of those rare pauses where the chaos takes a breath. I was signing a couple of discharge papers, already thinking about the coffee waiting for me when I got off shift, when I heard 3 soft knocks on the door. "Come in," I said without looking up. The door opened slowly, and then a voice, Doctor, do you remember me? There was something about the way she said it, a warmth, a vibration that cut through me before I even saw her face. I looked up, and there she was, Laura Jenkins, standing, smiling, wrapped in a blue scarf that made her pale skin glow softly. In her hands, a small bouquet of wildflowers. Simple, delicate, the kind that looks like they were picked with love, not haste. For a second time, just stopped. She wasn't the same woman I'd seen through a pixelated screen that night. Not the pale, trembling figure gasping for air. In front of me stood someone alive, truly alive. With a quiet light shining in her eyes, double quotes, Mrs. Jenkins, I managed to say, smiling without even realizing it. It's so good to see you again and on your feet. She laughed softly, the kind of laugh that eases something deep inside you. They told me you were the one who called for help, she said, stepping closer, and that you stayed on the line until the paramedics arrived. I looked down, suddenly shy. I didn't know how to answer. Sometimes when you do the right thing, gratitude stings, because it reminds you how fragile everything really was. I just did what anyone would have done, I murmured. She shook her head gently. No, Doctor. You did more than that? You stayed with me when I needed it the most. Her words landed softly, but they carried weight. The kind that sits quietly in your chest. I stayed silent for a moment, not trusting my own voice. When you spend enough time surrounded by life and death, you forget what it means to simply be present. Laura stepped closer and took my hand. Her fingers were warm now, fragile but full of life, life that refused to give up. After losing my husband, she said, her voice trembling, every night felt heavier than the last. I'd lie down, close my eyes, and the silence, it would crush me. Everything in the house reminded me he was gone, his cup, his chair, his scent. Everything except that call. I swallowed hard, trying not to let emotion show. She continued, her eyes glistening. That night, something changed. You weren't just a doctor on the other side of a screen. You stayed with me. I felt seen. I felt heard. And that gave me a reason to keep going. Her voice cracked, but not from sadness. It was pure emotion. The sound of someone learning how to breathe again after being underwater for too long. And in that moment, I understood that call had never been a coincidence. None of them are, really. Some encounters are brief, but they leave marks that never fade. I looked at her for a long moment, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over me. Gratitude that she was alive, that her story didn't end on that night of sirens, that somehow her broken heart had found a reason to beat again. Laura handed me the flowers. They're from my garden, she said with a shy smile. I thought you might like to have something that isn't on a screen. I took them carefully. They smelled faintly of fresh grass and something softer hope, maybe. Thank you, I said quietly. They mean more than you think. She nodded, then turned to leave. At the doorway, she looked back one last time. Don't stop doing what you do, Doctor. Sometimes a voice is all someone needs to keep breathing, and she walked away. Her figure disappeared down the hallway, but her words lingered. Floating gently in the quiet air she left behind, I sat there, staring at the closed door, the flowers still in my hand, my heart beating slower but fuller. I thought about how many times I'd wanted to end a call quickly, how many times I'd forgotten that on the other side of the screen there isn't just a name or a patient ID, there's a person. Someone who just wants to be heard. Since that night, every time I start a new video consultation, I see her face. The blue scarf. That fragile yet alive smile. And I remind myself it's not just a screen. It's a window. A window connecting to human beings trying not to give in to loneliness. Because at the end of the day, we don't just heal bodies. We heal absences, fears, silences. And sometimes, the only tool we have to do that is a voice. A voice on the other side of the screen. A voice that decides to stay. I didn't hear much from Laura after that. Sometimes she sends me short messages, a picture of her garden, a simple good morning, doctor. And every time I read them, I can't help but think that somehow we both survived that night. She survived her tired heart, And I survived the quiet indifference that medicine sometimes teaches us, because sometimes a simple voice on a screen is enough to remind you that you're still alive. Maybe you've been on either side of that call. The one who needed someone to stay, or the one who decided not to hang up. If Laura's story touched something in you, tell me in the comments, because sometimes sharing a story is just another way of saying, I'm still here. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay close. I have more stories that remind us we're never really alone, even when all we have is a voice on the other side of the screen. Asterisk.